Zeph-Val nodded slowly. He had never known a galaxy at war. For him, humans had always been allies and teachers. The idea of fighting them seemed impossible. "But you must remember what I have told you," his father said urgently. "Humans are not just our friends. They are our teachers. They showed us that strength comes from protecting others, not conquering them." The old commander's breathing was becoming very shallow. The machines around his bed were making warning sounds. But he had one final lesson to share. "If you ever face humans in battle again," he whispered, "remember this. They do not fight because they hate what is in front of them. They fight because they love what is behind them." Kethval reached out and took his son's hand. His grip was weak, but his words were strong. "And that love, my son, that love makes them capable of anything. It can turn enemies into allies. It can end wars that seem hopeless. It can change the galaxy itself." The old warrior smiled one last time. "Never fight a human, Zeph-Val. But if you must, remember to fight like one. Fight for love, not conquest. Fight to protect, not destroy. Fight to build peace, not just win battles." Zeph-Val held his father's hand as the medical machines fell silent. Outside their ship, human and Zephyrian vessels traveled together through the stars. Former enemies now working as one people, building a future that neither species could achieve. Alone, the young lieutenant understood now. Humans had not conquered the Zephyrians through superior weapons or tactics. They had conquered them through something much more powerful. They had shown the galaxy what it meant to be worth following God, and in doing so, they had won the greatest victory of all. They had turned war into peace, enemies into family and fear, into hope. The lesson was complete. The war was truly over, and the future belonged to those brave enough to love their enemies as much as their friends. Outside their ship, human vessels passed by in the darkness. Former enemies who had become trusted allies. Ships that carried both species working together toward a better future. "They taught us that peace is stronger than war," Kethval said. "And that lesson saved us all." The medical machines around Kethval's bed were beeping faster now. His son could see that his father was getting weaker, but the old commander's eyes were still bright with determination. He needed to finish the story. "The end came faster than anyone expected," Kethval said quietly. After 3 years of war, the Council was ready to destroy every human world. They built a new weapon, something that could kill entire planets. Zeph-Val leaned closer. This part of the story was not in any official records. The Council had kept it secret from everyone except the highest commanders. "The Star Killer," his father whispered. "A ship the size of a moon, with a weapon that could turn suns into bombs. One shot would destroy a solar system. The weapon had taken 2 years to build and cost more resources than 100 normal fleets. But the Council was desperate. Human ideas about freedom and peace were spreading across the galaxy. Dozens of species were rebelling against Zephyrian rule. High Admiral Zekmor commanded the Star Killer, Kethval said. He was ordered to destroy Earth first, the human home world. Make an example that would terrify the galaxy into submission. But as the massive ship approached human space, something unexpected happened. A small human fleet intercepted them. Just 12 ships against the most powerful weapon ever built. The human commander was Ambassador Carl Davis, Kethval said. Not a military officer, a diplomat. He came to negotiate. Davis had sent a message to the Star Killer, requesting permission to board and speak with Admiral Zekmor. The Admiral had agreed, curious about what the humans could possibly offer. Davis came alone, Kethval remembered. No guards, no weapons. Just an old man in a simple uniform. The ambassador had been escorted to the bridge of the Star Killer. Surrounded by Zephyrian officers, and facing certain death for his entire species, Davis had done something remarkable. He apologized, Kethval said, for the war, for all the Zephyrian soldiers who had died, for the pain and suffering on both sides. Admiral Zeke Moore had been stunned. No enemy commander had ever apologized to him before. Enemies were supposed to beg for mercy or threaten revenge. They did not express sorrow for their captors' losses. Davis said he understood why Zephyrians were angry. Kethval continued. Humans had disrupted the galactic order. They had inspired rebellions and challenged ancient systems. But then Davis had made an offer that changed everything. Instead of surrendering or begging for mercy, he proposed something the Admiral had never heard before. He offered to help, Kethval said. Davis said humans wanted to work with Zephyrians to build a better galaxy. Not through conquest, but through cooperation. The ambassador had brought detailed plans for joint colonies, shared technology programs, and cultural exchange missions. He wanted Zephyrians and humans to become partners instead of enemies. Admiral Zeke Moore called it impossible, Kethval said. Too many people had died. Too much anger existed on both sides. But Davis had smiled and told the Admiral about something called the Peace Corps, a human organization that sent volunteers to help other worlds. Engineers, doctors, teachers, and farmers who worked without payment to improve life for everyone. He said 1,000 human volunteers were ready to come to Zephyrian worlds, Kethval said, to help rebuild what the war had destroyed. This offer had confused every Zephyrian officer on the bridge. Their enemies were volunteering to help repair war damage. It made no tactical sense. Davis had one more surprise, Kethval said. He showed the Admiral a recording from Earth. The recording had been made in human cities around their home planet. Millions of humans holding vigils for Zephyrian war dead. Children lighting candles for alien soldiers they had never met. Families praying for peace between the species. Humans were mourning our losses, Kethval said quietly, even while we prepared to destroy their world. Admiral Zeke Moore had watched the recording in silence. He saw human children placing flowers on memorials for Zephyrian soldiers. Elderly humans weeping for young aliens who had died far from home. That was when the Admiral realized something, Kethval said. We had been fighting people who grieved for our dead more than we did. The confrontation had lasted 6 hours. Davis answered every question honestly and offered solutions to every problem. He never asked for mercy or threatened retaliation. He simply explained how peace would benefit everyone. Finally, Admiral Zeke Moore made a decision, Kethval said. He ordered the Star Killer to stand down. But the story did not end there. Other ships in the fleet had different commanders with different ideas. Some wanted to complete the mission and destroy Earth anyway. That was when I learned what human courage really meant, Kethval said. Commander Beth Turner was in charge of the small human escort fleet. Turner had seen the argument on the Zephyrian ships. Some wanted peace, others wanted war. The decision could go either way. So she did something that saved millions of lives. She moved her ship between the Star Killer and Earth, Kethval said. One small cruiser against a planet-destroying weapon. Turner had sent a message to all the Zephyrian ships. She said that if they wanted to destroy Earth, they would have to go through her first. Her ship could not stop the Star Killer, but she would try anyway. Then something amazing happened, Kethval said. The other human ships joined her. All 12 human vessels moved into position between the Star Killer and their home world. They formed a defensive line that would be vaporized instantly by the massive weapon. But they stayed anyway. They were not trying to win, Kethval realized. They were making a statement. Some things are worth dying for. The sight of those tiny ships protecting their world had moved many Zephyrian officers to tears. These humans knew they would die, but they refused to abandon their home. Admiral Zickmore announced his final decision, Kethval said. The Star Killer would not fire. The war was over. But the real surprise came next. Dr. Paul Kim, the human fleet medic, requested permission to board Zephyrian ships and treat wounded soldiers. He had been monitoring their communications and knew some crew members were injured. Dr. Kim spent 3 days moving between our ships, Kethval said, treating Zephyrian wounded with the same care he gave human patients. The medic had worked, without rest, saving lives and easing pain. He shared human medical techniques and trained Zephyrian doctors in new procedures. By the time he finished, the entire fleet respected him. That was how the peace began, Kethval said. Not with treaties or ceremonies, but with one human doctor helping his former enemies. Within weeks, Ambassador Davis had arranged the first joint human Zephyrian colony. Captain Sam Wright had volunteered to transport Zephyrian families to their new homes alongside human settlers. Wright treated everyone equally, Kethval said. Zephyrian children played with human children in his ship's corridors. Former enemies became neighbors. The colony had been more successful than anyone imagined. Humans and Zephyrians working together accomplished things neither species could do alone. Their joint technology projects advanced both civilizations by decades. I was assigned to that colony, Kethval said, as a military advisor. But there was no military work to do. Instead, Kethval had helped design schools where human and Zephyrian children learned together. He taught alien students about strategy and tactics, while human teachers showed him new ways to solve problems. That was where I got my radiation. Poisoning, he said. A reactor accident that should have killed everyone in the engineering section. But human engineers had worked alongside Zephyrian technicians to contain the damage. They shared the radiation exposure equally, saving the colony but poisoning themselves in the process. We all knew we would die eventually, Kethval said. But we also knew we had saved something important. The colony had become a model for the entire galaxy. Proof that former enemies could become family. Other species started forming their own mixed communities, ending centuries of isolation and conflict. 20 years later, my son, you are the result, Kethval said. A Zephyrian officer who grew up with human friends, who thinks peace is normal. But the real victory was not military, Kethval said. It was moral. They showed the galaxy that sacrifice and courage could defeat superior technology. Word of Titan's Edge spread across the galaxy within days. Species that had been conquered by the Zephyrians started to rebel. They used human tactics, turning civilian ships into weapons and never surrendering. The war changed after that, Kethval said. We were no longer fighting just humans. We were fighting an idea, the idea that freedom was worth dying for. His son sat quietly, thinking about the story. Finally, Zethval asked, "How did we not see it coming?" Kethval smiled sadly. Because we thought war was about weapons and tactics. We never understood that for humans, war was about love. And love makes people capable of impossible things. Kethval's breathing was getting worse. The poison in his lungs made each word harder to speak. But his son needed to hear the rest of the story. The most important part was still coming. After Titan's Edge, the Council finally listened to my reports, he said. They wanted to understand how humans kept winning against superior forces. The old commander remembered those dark meetings in the war room aboard the flagship. Maps of human space covered the walls, marked with red symbols showing Zephyrian defeats. Every week brought news of another impossible human victory. General Caxvel ordered me to study captured human military manuals, Kethval continued. He thought their tactics must be written down somewhere, some secret strategy we could learn. But when the documents arrived, they confused everyone. Human military doctrine was completely different from anything the Zephyrians understood. Their rules of war focused more on protecting civilians than destroying enemies. Their first rule was never leave anyone behind, Kethval said. Not just their own soldiers. Anyone, including prisoners and enemy wounded. This made no tactical sense. Rescuing wounded enemies used valuable resources and time. It put rescue teams in danger for no military gain. But humans did it anyway, in every battle. The second rule was even stranger, he continued. Protect non-combatants at all costs, even if it means losing the battle. Zethval frowned. How can you win a war if you are willing to lose battles? That is what we asked, his father replied. But humans thought differently. They believed losing with honor was better than winning without it. The captured manuals contained hundreds of examples from human history. Stories of soldiers who died protecting enemy civilians. Armies that refused to fight in populated areas. Commanders who surrendered rather than risk innocent lives. We tried to use their tactics against them, Kethval said. General Caxvel thought if we followed human rules, we could beat them at their own game. The experiment had been a disaster. Zephyrian soldiers were trained to follow orders and achieve objectives. They could not adapt to human-style thinking. When ordered to protect enemy civilians, they became confused and ineffective. But we did capture some important humans, Kethval said. General Ray Cooper was their ground commander on Kepler Station. We thought interrogating him would give us their secrets. General Cooper had been brought to the flagship in chains. The Zephyrian intelligence officers expected him to be angry or afraid. Instead, he seemed curious about his captors. Cooper asked about our families, Kethval remembered. He wanted to know if Zephyrian soldiers had children, if we missed them during long campaigns. The questions had made the interrogators uncomfortable. They were supposed to be extracting information from Cooper, not sharing personal details about their own lives. But Cooper was clever, Kethval said. While he talked about families and homes, he was studying us, learning how we thought. Within a few days, Cooper understood Zephyrian military culture better than most humans. He knew that Zephyrian soldiers valued honor and duty above personal feelings, that they followed orders without question. He used this knowledge to escape, Kethval said, but not the way you would expect. Cooper did not try to steal weapons or overpower guards. Instead, he started helping the Zephyrian medical staff treat wounded soldiers. He shared human medical techniques that worked better than Zephyrian methods. The doctors liked him, Kethval explained. He saved the lives of several Zephyrian soldiers who would have died otherwise. When Cooper finally escaped, half the medical staff helped him. They gave him a shuttle and safe passage to human space. Not because he threatened them, but because they felt grateful for his help. That was when we realized humans had a special ability, Kethval said. They could make friends with anyone, even their enemies. The war reports were full of similar stories. Colonel Lisa Park had escaped from a prison camp by convincing her guards that she was not their real enemy. Sergeant Mike Chun had turned an entire Zephyrian garrison to his side by sharing food and stories about his home planet. They did not bribe or threaten, Kethval said. They just treated everyone like family. And people responded to that kindness. The most troubling example was Dr. Jane Miller. She was a human psychologist who studied alien behavior. The Zephyrians captured her during a raid on a research station. Dr. Miller was supposed to be interrogated for intelligence, Kethval said. Instead, she ended up counseling Zephyrian soldiers who were suffering from battle stress. Miller had noticed that many Zephyrian troops were having nightmares and panic attacks. Their military had no treatment for these problems. Soldiers were expected to suppress their emotions and continue fighting. She taught them human techniques for dealing with trauma, Kethval said. Meditation, breathing exercises, group therapy sessions. Within weeks, the Zephyrian soldiers under Miller's care were performing better in combat. They were calmer, more focused, and worked together more effectively. Word spread through the fleet about the human doctor who could heal minds. The Admiral ordered Miller released, Kethval said, not as a prisoner exchange, but as a gesture of respect. She had helped our people, so we helped her return home. But Miller had asked for something unusual before leaving. She wanted to train Zephyrian medics in her techniques. She spent 2 weeks teaching alien soldiers how to care for their own mental health. She left us stronger than we were before, Kethval said. A human prisoner made our fleet more effective. This pattern repeated across the war. Humans captured by Zephyrian forces often ended up improving their captors' lives somehow. They shared technology, taught new skills, or simply provided friendship to lonely soldiers far from home. We started to realize that capturing humans was counterproductive, Kethval said. They turned our own troops against us, not through force, but through kindness. The intelligence reports showed similar problems throughout Zephyrian space. Human prisoners were starting small revolutions wherever they went. Not violent uprisings, but changes in how people thought about war and peace. Some of our colonies started asking why we were fighting humans at all, Kethval said. The prisoners seemed like decent people who just wanted to live in peace. The war effort was falling apart from within. Zephyrian soldiers who had met humans personally began questioning their orders. Some deserted rather than attack human colonies. Others provided intelligence to human forces. Admiral Caxvel tried to solve the problem by forbidding contact with human prisoners, Kethval said. But it was too late. The damage was already done. The humans had weaponized something the Zephyrians never expected: empathy. By treating their enemies with kindness and respect, they turned soldiers into allies and changed the nature of the conflict. We were fighting a war we could not win, Kethval realized. Not because our weapons were weak, but because our hearts were changing. Zethval sat quietly, processing what his father had told him. Finally, he asked, "How do you fight an enemy? That makes you want to be their friend?" "You can't," Kethval replied. "That is the lesson I learned too late. Humans do not just defeat their enemies, they convert them." The old commander closed his eyes, exhausted by the memories. But there was still one more part of the story to tell, the most important part of all. "The war ended not because we were conquered," he said softly, "but because we chose to stop fighting. And that choice changed everything." The medical machines beeped steadily as Kethval rested for a moment. His son waited patiently, knowing there was more to the story. Outside their ship, the stars looked peaceful, but the old commander remembered when space had been full of war. After New Denver, everything changed, Kethval said finally. The council was embarrassed, angry. They decided to show the galaxy what happened to species that defied Zephyrian power. Zethval shifted in his chair. What did they do? "They sent the entire Second Fleet," his father replied. 200 ships, the best commanders, the newest weapons. They were going to destroy every human colony and make an example of the whole species. The old warrior remembered the briefing. High Command had been furious about the losses at New Denver. Admiral Vexcan had been demoted and sent to guard duty on a remote station. The new commander, Admiral Vexvo R, promised the council the humans would be extinct within a month. "I was promoted after New Denver," Kethval said. "They made me senior tactical officer on the flagship." The council wanted someone who had seen humans fight, but Kethval had tried to warn them. He wrote reports explaining what made humans dangerous. He told them about the rescue ships and the field hospitals, about how humans turned enemies into allies. Nobody listened. "The target was Titan's Edge," he continued. A human system with 12 colonies and maybe 2 million people. Intelligence said they had a small defense fleet, 30 ships at most. The Zephyrian fleet had jumped into the system, expecting easy victory. Instead, they found something impossible. The humans were waiting for them. They knew we were coming, Kefval said. Somehow, they had learned about our attack plans. All their civilian ships had been evacuated to the outer planets. Only military vessels remained. But calling them military vessels was generous. The human fleet was a mix of converted cargo ships, mining platforms, and a few actual warships. They were outnumbered 7-1. Their weapons were still primitive compared to Zephyrian technology. Admiral Vexvor laughed when he saw them. Kefval remembered. He said it would be like stepping on insects. The human fleet was commanded by Admiral Kate Brooks. She had been a cargo hauler captain before the war started. The Zephyrian intelligence. Files said she had no formal military training. She learned to fight by watching the battles at New Denver and other colonies. Brooks sent us a message, Kefval said. She thanked us for coming. She said it would save her the trouble of hunting us down one by one. The Zephyrian officers had thought this was empty bragging. How could 30 human ships hunt down 200 Zephyrian warships? It was impossible. The battle started normally. Kefval continued. Our long-range weapons hit their ships first. We destroyed 6 human vessels in the opening minutes. But the humans did not retreat. They did not even try to avoid the plasma fire. Instead, they flew straight into the Zephyrian formation, accepting terrible losses to get close enough for their own weapons to work. That was when we learned about their new tactic, Kefval said. They called it the dead man's switch. Every human ship had been modified with the same system. If the ship was too damaged to fight, the crew could activate a special program. The ship's computer would take control and ram the nearest enemy vessel at maximum speed. Commander Steve Walsh was the first to use it, Kefval said. His destroyer was cut in half by our plasma cannons. He should have ordered his crew to abandon ship. Instead, Walsh had activated the dead man's switch and aimed his dying ship at the Zephyrian flagship. The collision had destroyed both vessels. Instantly, killing Walsh and his crew, along with Admiral Vexvorar and 800 Zephyrian soldiers. One damaged human ship killed our fleet commander, Kefval said quietly, in the first 10 minutes of battle. But that was just the beginning. More human ships were activating their dead man switches. Ships that could have escaped instead chose to ram Zephyrian vessels. It was like fighting an enemy that preferred death to defeat. The strangest part was their communications, Kefval said. We could hear everything they said to each other. Lieutenant Nina Carter had been the communications officer on Brooks' flagship. During the worst part of the battle, when human ships were dying all around her, she had started broadcasting something unexpected. She was playing music, Kefval explained. Human war songs, old ones from their planet's history. The music had been loud enough for both fleets to hear. Songs about soldiers who never surrendered, about people who died fighting for their homes, about sacrifice and honor and never giving up. It was psychological warfare, Kefval realized, but not the kind we understood. They were not trying to scare us. They were reminding themselves why they were fighting. The human ships coordinated their attacks with the music. When the songs reached their loudest parts, entire squadrons would charge the Zephyrian lines. They used the rhythm to time their movements, and they brought civilian ships, Kefval said, cargo haulers and passenger liners that should have been evacuated. But these ships were not carrying weapons. They were carrying people, families of the human soldiers, engineers and doctors and teachers who wanted to help with the battle. Chief Tony Rodriguez was an engineer on a cargo ship, Kefval said. When the fighting started, he moved between the human warships, repairing damage while under fire. Rodriguez had modified his cargo ship's loading equipment to work like a mobile repair platform. While Zephyrian fighters shot at him, he welded hull breaches and replaced damaged weapons on human ships. He saved dozens of human vessels, Kefval said. But the most amazing thing was how he died. Near the end of the battle, Rodriguez's ship had been surrounded by Zephyrian fighters. His cargo ship had no weapons and no chance of escape. Instead of surrendering, he had done something incredible. He overloaded his ship's fusion reactor, Kefval explained, turned his cargo ship into a bomb. But first, he rammed it into the middle of our formation. The explosion had destroyed Rodriguez's ship along with 12 Zephyrian fighters and a light cruiser. But before he died, he had sent a message to the human fleet. He said, "Tell my wife I love her. Tell my kids to be brave," Kefval remembered. Then he laughed and said, "Let's see how many of these bastards I can take with me." The human tactics made no sense to Zephyrian military thinking. They spent ships and lives like they did not matter. But every sacrifice weakened the Zephyrian fleet and inspired other human crews to fight harder. Admiral Brooks coordinated everything from her flagship, Kefval said. She was in the middle of the worst fighting, but she never tried to protect herself. Brooks had flown her command ship directly at the largest Zephyrian battlecruiser. Her weapons could barely scratch its armor, but she kept attacking anyway. When her ship was too damaged to continue, she activated her dead man switch. She could have escaped, Kefval said. Her ship was fast enough, but she chose to ram our battlecruiser instead. The collision had cracked the battlecruiser's hull and killed Brooks along with her entire crew. But it also left the huge Zephyrian ship helpless and drifting. That was when the human civilians attacked, Kefval said. Cargo ships and passenger liners that had been waiting at the edge of the battle. These ships had no weapons at all, but they had something else. Families of the human soldiers who had just died. Parents and spouses and children who had watched their loved ones sacrifice themselves. They did not come to fight, Kefval explained. They came to rescue survivors from both sides. The civilian ships moved through the wreckage, collecting escape pods and picking up damaged fighters. They saved human survivors, but they also saved Zephyrians, even though the battle was still going on. I was in one of those escape pods, Kefval admitted. My ship had been destroyed by a ramming attack. I thought I was going to die in space. But a human passenger liner had found his pod and brought him aboard. The crew had given him medical care and food. They treated him like a guest, not a prisoner. The captain was an old human woman named Mary, Kefval said. Her son had died in the battle. He was one of the pilots who used the dead man switch. Mary had sat with Kefval while the doctors worked on his radiation burns. She told him about her son, about how proud she was that he had died protecting others. She asked me about my family, Kefval said. About you, my son. She wanted to know if you were safe. This had confused Kefval completely. This human woman's son had just been killed by Zephyrian weapons. But she was worried about whether his enemy's child was safe. That was when I finally understood, the old commander said. Humans do not just fight for victory. They fight to protect the future, even for their enemy's children. The battle had ended with the Zephyrian fleet in retreat. They had lost over half their ships and thousands of soldiers. The humans had lost almost everything, but they had won. Kefval coughed again and reached for the water cup beside his bed. His son helped him drink. The old commander's hands shook, but his mind was still sharp. The memories of that first battle were as clear as if they had happened yesterday. New. Denver was supposed to be easy, he continued. 30 Zephyrian warships against a mining colony. We had plasma cannons that could crack mountains. They had rock crushers and cargo haulers. Zethval listened carefully. His father had never talked about the details before. Most Zephyrian veterans did not like to remember the early fights with humans. Admiral Vexcan gave the order to attack. Kethval said he wanted to destroy one of their mining stations as a warning. Show them what our weapons could do. The old warrior remembered watching the targeting screen. The mining station was huge but fragile. It would break apart with one good hit from their plasma cannons. The humans would see their technology was useless and give up. Our gunner fired, Kethval said. A perfect shot. The mining station exploded in a ball of fire and metal. But something unexpected happened next. Instead of surrendering, the humans got angry. Their cargo ships started moving toward us. Kethval told his son, these were not warships. They were big, slow vessels made for carrying rocks and metal. No weapons. No shields. But they kept coming. Zethval frowned. That makes no sense. Why would they attack ships they could not hurt? His father smiled sadly. That is what we thought too. Admiral Vexcan laughed. He said the humans were too stupid to know when they were beaten. The first human ship to reach the Zephyrian fleet was called the Iron Mountain. It was a bulk freighter designed to carry tons of ore. Captain Ben Clark was in command. The Zephyrians tried to contact him and tell him to turn back. Clark's response was very human, Kethval said. He told us to go to hell. Then he turned off his radio. The Iron Mountain had no weapons, but it did have something else. A massive engine designed to push heavy loads. Clark aimed his ship directly at the nearest Zephyrian destroyer and pushed his engine to maximum power. We shot at him, Kethval remembered. Our plasma beams cut through his hull like paper. But he did not stop. Even when his ship was falling apart around him, he kept coming. The Iron Mountain hit the destroyer at full speed. Both ships exploded. Captain Clark died instantly, along with his crew of 12 humans. But he also killed 300 Zephyrian soldiers. One cargo ship destroyed a military destroyer, Kethval said quietly. It should have been impossible. But that was just the beginning. More human ships were coming. Mining vessels, cargo haulers, even small passenger shuttles. None of them had real weapons, but all of them were flying straight at the Zephyrian fleet. Admiral Vexcan ordered all ships to open fire. Kethval continued. We destroyed ship after ship, but they kept coming, and some of them got through. The humans had done something no military academy taught. They turned their civilian ships into weapons. Mining lasers became ship cutters. Cargo containers became bombs. Even the small shuttles carried crews ready to ram Zephyrian fighters. That was when we met Dr. Lisa Hayes, Kethval said. She was the colony's xenobiologist, a scientist, not a soldier. Dr. Hayes had sent a message to all the human ships. But the Zephyrians intercepted it too. She was not giving military orders. She was not talking about tactics or weapons. Instead, she was talking about the Zephyrian prisoners. She told the human ships to be careful, Kethval explained. Some of our fighters had been damaged and captured. She said the prisoners were scared and needed medical help. This confused the Zephyrian commanders. In the middle of a battle, the humans were worried about enemy soldiers who had been trying to kill them. Dr. Hayes set up a field hospital, Kethval said, right in the middle of the fighting. She treated human wounded and Zephyrian wounded. The same way. Zethval shook his head. That is foolish. You do not help enemies during a battle. That is what we thought, his father agreed. But it did something to our soldiers. The ones who were captured expected to be killed or tortured. Instead, human doctors fixed their injuries and gave them food. The battle continued for 6 hours. The humans lost dozens of ships and hundreds of people, but they also destroyed or damaged half the Zephyrian fleet. And they did it with mining equipment and cargo haulers. The strangest part was how they worked together, Kethval said. They had no central command, no battle computers. But every human ship seemed to know exactly what the others were doing. Engineer Amy Foster had been working on one of the mining platforms. When the attack started, she modified the platform's rock-cutting laser into a ship weapon. Then she coordinated with the cargo ships to create a crossfire pattern that trapped 3 Zephyrian fighters. She was not a soldier, Kethval explained. She was an engineer who fixed machines. But she fought like she had been planning this battle her whole life. The human ships used tactics that no military manual covered. They shared fuel and ammunition while under fire. Damaged ships would ram enemy vessels instead of retreating. Cargo haulers would shield smaller ships with their own hulls. And they never stopped talking to each other, Kethval said. Our communications officers could hear them on the radio. They were not giving orders or sharing tactical information. Zethval leaned forward. What were they saying? They were talking about their families, his father replied. About their friends. About the people they were protecting. One pilot kept talking about his daughter's birthday party. Another one was worried about his neighbor's sick dog. This had confused the Zephyrian intelligence officers. Human military. Communications were full of personal conversations. They talked about dinner plans and football games while flying through deadly plasma fire. But those conversations made them stronger, Kethval realized. They were not just fighting for their colony. They were fighting for each other, for people they cared about. The battle ended when Admiral Vexcan finally ordered a retreat. The Zephyrian fleet was too damaged to continue. But as they pulled back, something else happened that shocked everyone. The humans sent rescue ships, Kethval said. They came to collect our escape pods and damaged fighters. Captain Jake Morrison himself had led the rescue mission. His ship picked up Zephyrian survivors and brought them back to New Denver. The same humans who had been shooting at them hours before now gave them medical care and clean clothes. Morrison visited our wounded soldiers in the hospital, Kethval continued. He apologized for the battle. He said he was sorry people had died. This was completely outside Zephyrian experience. Enemy commanders did not apologize for winning battles. They did not take care of prisoners like honored guests. But the most shocking thing was what he said next, Kethval told his son. Morrison told our soldiers that they were welcome to stay on New Denver if they wanted. He offered them jobs in the mines. Several Zephyrian prisoners had accepted. They were tired of war and curious about human society. Within a year, they were working alongside the same humans they had been fighting. That was when I first understood. Kethval said, humans do not just defeat their enemies. They turn them into friends. And that makes them far more dangerous than any weapon. The old commander closed his eyes. The memory was exhausting, but important. His son needed to understand what they had faced. The council was furious, he said. We had sent 30 warships to intimidate one small colony. Instead, we lost 15 ships and gained nothing. Worse, the humans had shown the galaxy that we could be beaten. Word of the battle spread quickly. Other species that had been conquered by the Zephyrians started to whisper. If humans could fight back with mining equipment, maybe resistance was possible. That was our first mistake, Kethval said. We thought the battle was about winning or losing. But for humans, it was about something much more important. Zethval waited for his father to explain. It was about proving that some things are worth fighting for, the old warrior said. And once they proved that, everything changed. The lights in the medical room were too bright. Commander Kethval closed his eyes and tried to breathe slowly. Each breath hurt his chest. The poison from the old war was finally killing him. 20 years had passed since that terrible battle. but his body still carried the scars. His son sat next to the bed. Lieutenant Zethval looked young and strong in his blue uniform, the same uniform Kethval had worn when he first met the humans, back when everything seemed so simple. "Father, tell me about the war," Zethval said. His voice was soft but eager. "Tell me about the humans." Kethval opened his eyes and looked at his son. A boy had no idea what he was asking. None of them did any more. The new generation of Zephyrian soldiers grew up thinking humans were allies. They did not remember the fear. "You want to know about humans?" Kethval asked. His voice was weak but clear. "Then listen carefully. What I tell you might save your life one day." The old commander shifted on his bed. The machines around him beeped softly. Outside the window, stars moved slowly past their ship. They were heading home to Zephyr Prime. Kethval would not live to see it again. 25 years ago, we first heard about them, he began. A new species had joined the galaxy. They called themselves humans. They came from a small blue planet on the edge of nowhere. Zethval leaned forward. He had heard bits of this story before, but never from his father. The council laughed at them, Kethval continued. These humans had no plasma weapons, no force shields, no faster-than-light communication. They barely had space travel at all. The old Zephyrian remembered those first reports. The humans seemed so weak. Their ships were made of metal and moved slowly. Their weapons shot pieces of metal instead of energy beams. The Galactic Council called them primitive. "We studied them for months," Kethval said. "Our scientists looked at their technology. Our spies watched their colonies. Everything we learned made us think they would be easy to defeat, but there had been small signs. Strange things in the reports that nobody paid attention to. Humans did not have kings or emperors. They worked together in ways that confused the other species. When one human colony was attacked by space pirates, humans from dozens of other worlds came to help. They did not ask for payment. They did not ask if it was profitable. They just came. I was young then," Kethval told his son. "Younger then. You are now. I believed what our leaders said. Humans were weak. They would surrender quickly when faced with real military power." Zethval nodded. This made sense to him. The Zephyrians had the best weapons in the galaxy. Their ships could destroy planets. Their soldiers were trained from birth. How could any primitive species stand against them? "But there was one report that worried me," his father said. "It was about human history. Our researchers found out how humans had lived on their home planet." Kethval closed his eyes and remembered. The report had been buried in thousands of pages of data. Most commanders never read it, but something about it had caught his attention. "Humans evolved as hunters," he said. "Not like us. We Zephyrians became smart and built tools to hunt. Humans became hunters by running. They would chase their prey for days. They never stopped. They never gave up. Even when the animal was faster and stronger, humans would keep following until it collapsed from exhaustion." The young lieutenant frowned. "That does not sound very dangerous, father." "That is what I thought too," Kethval said. "But the report said something else. Humans did not just hunt animals this way. They hunted each other. For thousands of years, human tribes fought wars. The losers were not just defeated. They were completely destroyed. But humans never learned to surrender properly." The old commander paused. The memory was painful, not because of his wounds, but because of his mistakes. "The report said that humans had a saying," he continued. "When faced with impossible odds, they would say, 'We will fight them on the beaches. We will fight them in the streets. We will never surrender.' I read that and thought it was just empty words." Outside their ship, another vessel passed by. It was human-made. Kethval could tell by its strange design. Human ships still looked different from everyone else's. They were built to be repaired, not replaced. Built to keep fighting even when damaged. The council decided to test the humans, Kethval said. We would take one of their small colonies, show them our power, make them understand their place in the galaxy. Zethval shifted in his chair. Which colony did you attack? New Denver. His father replied. A mining world with maybe 50,000 humans. They had no military base, no warships, just mining equipment and cargo haulers. The old Zephyrian remembered the briefing. Intelligence said it would take maybe an hour to secure the planet. The humans would see their ships and surrender immediately. It was supposed to be a simple show of force. I was the tactical officer on the flagship, Kethval said. I calculated that we needed 12 ships to make the humans understand. The admiral brought 30. He wanted to be absolutely sure. But as they approached the human world, something felt wrong. The humans did not try to run. They did not send messages begging for mercy. Instead, they sent a single transmission to the Zephyrian fleet. What did they say? Zethval asked. His father smiled, but it was not a happy smile. They said, "Welcome to New Denver. Please state your intentions." That was all. Like we were visiting neighbors. The Zephyrian fleet had expected fear. Instead, they got politeness. It was the first sign that they did not understand humans at all. We told them to surrender immediately, Kethval continued. We showed them our weapons. We explained how easily we could destroy their cities. The human response came back in minutes. It was from someone called Captain Jake Morrison, the colony defense coordinator. He said, "We appreciate the warning. Our answer is no. Have a nice day." Zethval stared at his father. They refused? Just like that? Just like that, Kethval confirmed. No negotiation. No asking for time to consider. No begging for their lives. They just said no. The old commander coughed. The poison in his lungs was getting worse. But he needed to finish this story. His son needed to understand. That was when I first realized we had made a terrible mistake, he said. These humans were not like other species. They did not think like us. And that made them far more dangerous than we could have imagined. The machines around Kethval beeped faster. His son looked worried, but the old warrior held up a hand. He was not finished yet. Son, let me tell you the most important thing. I learned about humans, he said. They are not stronger than us. They are not smarter than us. Their technology is not better than ours. Zethval waited for his father to continue. But they have something we do not understand, Kethval whispered. Something that makes them more dangerous than any weapon. They have hope, and hope makes them do impossible things.